Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Olivia Allen. I work with the GCA as the facilitator of the water adaptation community. GCA is an international organization working as a solutions broker to accelerate action and support for adaptation solutions. This webinar is supported by GCA and Deltaris's work with the International Panel on Deltas and Coastal Areas, which is IPDC, an initiative of the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. IPDC has a strategic goal to contribute to a more resilient climate future in deltas, coastal areas, and small islands through dedicated leadership, national adaptation plans, knowledge partners, finance, and international coalitions. This webinar series that the water adaptation community has been hosting and will continue to host is to support IPDC knowledge sharing. To get us started, I would like to introduce our chair for this event, the Honorable Mohammed Abul Kalam Azad, Special Envoy to the Climate Vulnerability Forum for Bangladesh. His Excellency is also the president, he's with the presidency of the Climate Vulnerability Forum for Bangladesh, and he's also working as a national consultant, a strategic advisor of UNDP, senior strategic consultant of one of the prominent private sector power generators, Summit, land management specialist under the Ministry of Land of Bangladesh, and volunteers as the president of Bangladesh Scouts. He was commissioner for the Global Commission on Biodiverse Cities by 2030 under the World Economic Forum. And earlier, Mr. Azad worked as a distinguished fellow for the Global Center on Adaptation. I know he was instrumental to setting up GCA's Bangladesh office and principal coordinator of Sustainable Development Goals in Bangladesh. He led the SDG planning and implementation for 4 years of the Prime Minister's Office of Bangladesh, and he is honored with various awards along with the very prestigious Japanese government's second highest award, Rising Sun Gold and Silver Star. Mr. Azad, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Oliver. It's a great opportunity for all of us. I welcome you to this webinar, Water and Climate Adaptation Strategies, the case of Bangladesh. We understand this webinar will be for 1.5 hours, perhaps just a few minutes, maybe longer, if you have much more inquisitiveness on this issue. We all know Bangladesh is an extremely resilient delta. And the country faces many water-related challenges due to climate change, such as flooding, sea level erosion, river erosion, drought, and so many. Today, we will learn how Bangladesh remains resilient by being extremely proactive in managing climate change impacts. We all know Bangladesh had the strike of cyclone Vola back in 1970. And from then, we were working for reducing the damages, deaths, and all this. Very amazingly, in 1920, the cyclone Amphan of same magnitude could cause a very little loss. So, dear colleagues, let us now here to have the webinar. Today we know the objectives of this today's webinar is sharing knowledge of successful water climate adaptation strategies and practices in Bangladesh. We also try to understand how Bangladesh is engaged experts, stakeholders in the region to highlight emerging knowledge and identify knowledge gaps to close. And finally, build awareness and momentum for water adaptation to mobilize action. Now, we will have, you already know that we have 5 speakers today. All these are distinguished speakers. When they will speak, I will introduce them, each of them separately. First of all, opening remarks from Mr. Riaz Hamidullah, Ambassador of Bangladesh to Netherlands. So, Mr. Riaz Hamidullah, Ambassador, has been serving in The Hague as Bangladesh Ambassador to the Netherlands since 2020. He earlier served as Bangladesh envoy to Sri Lanka from 2016 to 20. He had served in the New Year, basically on the mission to the UN and in New Delhi. On deputation from government, he had served as the director of the South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation Secretariat, that is SARC. In his career, spanning nearly 3 decades, he had substantial footprint in multilateral economic diplomacy as well as regional cooperation, largely covering issues related to sustainable development, water, climate changes, agriculture, food security, business, and all these. Technology and innovation remains area of his cross-cutting interest. So, my request will be to Honorable Ambassador, Your Excellency, the Bangladesh government has set the policy and programmatic framework by way of National Action Plan for Climate Adaptation and that strategy, Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, and obviously the Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100. To start us off, share how, in your view, without limitations, Bangladesh government would and people wish to secure climate adaptation for all. Ambassador Riaz Hamidullah.
Thank you, sir. It's a great pleasure to see you, having known you for decades, and good to see you in chair as well, sir. To everyone joining from the Netherlands or this part of the world, good morning and good afternoon to all in Bangladesh. It's a very interesting question, sir, that you posed. So that allows me or asks that I avoid any bit of prognosis, and I see a very strong lineup of Catherine, Dr. Hassin, and Planning Commission, so they would fill in. Being in the Netherlands and having interaction with the likes of DCA, Deltares, IG, and seeing a number of things that actually got into motion in Bangladesh bilaterally, multilaterally, in terms of in the intersection of water and climate. Sorry, I have a bad throat. I'd like to put these the plans that you referred to, and eventually those are to connect also with the government's Vision 2041, which is an aspirational document as to how do we navigate. To me, it is to get the narratives right. Essentially, how do we convert the climatic impacts from challenges to opportunities? How do we lessen the manifestations, impacts? How do we address harms caused from justice angle? How do we ensure that we get the choices right? And choices, again, where we see so many trade-offs coming. I'll try to so I will not necessarily at all go into the manifestation, because manifestation will be covered by a number of the other speakers to come in. Trade-offs. As Bangladesh goes for or an aspirational high growth trajectory, we would see increasingly that when the climatic layers are coming, challenges are coming, we'd see that in terms of any decision to be taken by any ministry or in any cluster, the choices would get increasingly difficult. That is at the domestic or national level, but also at the subnational level. Subnational is very important because that is what Agenda 2030 stressed that we focus. At the same time, inequalities, both in terms of social inequalities and also economic inequalities. Getting those right would be important. I often see, and I'm sure that many of you, particularly you, Mr. Moderator, sir, you'd see that in terms of taking a decision, having stint in the government, quite often as Bangladesh goes on high growth overdrive, we'd see that balancing the private interest and public good increasingly would come as a challenge. Now, in terms of response, I mean, we are all engaged in at the international level on the in the UNFCCC process. Now, in the UNFCCC process, I often say that mitigation is something which is often beyond our control. It's a function of the global consensus where it will come. Where for a country like Bangladesh, which is facing existential challenges, where we are to focus and where the world actually need to get Bangladesh to support is in the intersection of climate adaptation and technology. Quite often we see that the technology pillar, vertical, is little understood, or its discussion is avoided. And then we go into finance. But from Bangladesh's point of view, it is increasingly important and getting important that we look at climate adaptation not in isolation, but climate adaptation together with climate technology. And here I would lean on, refer Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina when she famously said in New York, in the Asia Society, articulating her view of Bangladesh's aspiration of climate technology. She said that we are not looking for climate life enriching technologies. We are looking for life-saving technologies in the areas of agriculture, health, public infrastructure. And these are technologies which are often phased out in the Western world, in the global North. And these are dated of 2 or 3 decades old. This could be of extreme importance for the lives and livelihoods of millions. I think at the same time, what is important is to understand that the plans and strategies which are in place, which are good, are quite often more sectoral or sector driven. It's increasingly coming to attention that how do we build or secure interlinkages among the plans and strategies? And also, how do we deal with unknowns or uncertainties? If I look at just 10 years back from now, when NAPA, for example, was being drawn, and in today's context, we are now, the ground realities have significantly changed and are changing fast. Quite often, I see that it's a race of something like catch me if you can. And that is, how do we kind of balance those? How do we deal with uncertainties, risks, disruptions? That will be coming into question. In the process, how do we involve the whole of society and balance with the whole of government? How do you intersect the two? That would be equally of importance. Now, climatic challenges are not something in its own, or the solutions thereof. These are essentially to secure the economic competitiveness or the niche of Bangladesh, as particularly when Bangladesh is coming out as a middle-income country, where long-held preferences, support measures are going to be off. At the same time, when Bangladesh is to come out, I mean, I'm just bringing the other reality into this complex set of equations. We are saying that the world, particularly coming out of the Paris Agreement, is emphatically, or already has emphatically pronounced on the net zero vision, which is to lessen or zero carbon footprint. At the same time, here in Europe, we are hearing, or we're seeing a lot of movement on circularity all across. Now, for a country like Bangladesh, which is already battling existential challenges, vulnerabilities all across, particularly in the hotspots like coast, the riverine and the floodplains or the wetlands, how are these to impact on manufacturing, particularly manufacturing and urbanization, when it is not only to focus to generate wealth or well-being within the national territory, but essentially to get more out of getting connected to the global supply chain. So there, I go back to the earlier point that climate adaptation cannot be and is not to be seen in isolation, but together with climate technology. It's also important when we look at all the plans that how do we bring the solutions not simply as a matter of technology, innovation, and finance. What would be the better mode of getting resources? Obviously, we look forward to, or we keep on urging in the global spaces, including in the UNFCCC or the Financing for Development for resources which are global resources, but mobilizing the local resources, meaning particularly from the private sector, is increasingly also something coming into discussion, quite logically so, because 92% of Bangladesh economy is driven by private sector. And if I go back to the Delta Plan that you mentioned, in the Delta Plan financing, it's already agreed that every year 2.5% of Delta Plan is of Bangladesh GDP is to be mobilized. In the mobilization, 0.5 is to come from Bangladeshi private sector. Now, the logical question that should come is, how are we to leverage, incentivize the private sector in Bangladesh? That's an open question, but I think maybe in this conversation or elsewhere, there's a question which is to be looked at. To end, while all the plans have been drawn, plans are good to the extent that these are realized, implemented. Plans are also good to the extent that these can factor in and can handle uncertainties. Uncertainty in the sense that we're seeing that salinity intrusion is coming much faster than we anticipated. We're seeing that salinity intrusion is quite likely to destabilize a good part of the southern part of Bangladesh. How are these to impact? How would the impact manufacturing, urbanization? These are more questions are there more than the answers are. So I believe that the way we have the plans, getting the intersection of the plans, interlinkages, as also in a very dynamic way, how do we foresee the scenarios? Where are the competing scenarios? Where are the possible trade-offs? And how can we minimize the fallout of the trade-offs in taking a decision or choice? These would be increasingly important for Bangladesh, for the government as also the people. I'll stop here.
Excellent. So, dear Ambassador, you categorically mentioned about the Vision 2041, challenges and opportunities, choice, the right thing, inequalities, private interest and public goods, adaptation and technology, life-sharing technology, so many. And also risk, uncertainty. You specifically mentioned about the whole of the society and government, and also the better mode of resources from private and public. Can you please link how whole of the society and governance with the private sector is being implemented in Bangladesh?
I think, sir, citing an example right now is might be difficult, but I essentially flag that this is a need where, for example, the way we look at the PPP projects, for example, I will bring that into illustration. It's more of a dotted line or dotted space at the moment than we can bring illustration. There are some very micro examples, but I can go to a particular example in Satkira where an entrepreneur came up with solution where he is providing piped water to some of the villages, where the villagers would have normally gone out or walked 3 to 4 kilometers every day or send their girls to source potable water. So that's a very micro example, but I think what is needed and what we need to look for is more of the macro solutions. I would think of a meso solution where one day a Dutch gentleman came and he said, my name is Aryan and I work for something called Salt Doctor. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm going to Bangladesh in Patuakhali district And there, what I've given the situation that I've observed, I think that there are already technology which can help trap rainwater and then store it for a good part of the year in the underground aquifer. So these are the two illustrations which come to my mind. But in terms of the policy interventions or programmatic, I'm not sure how much something scalable already exists, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for your intervention. Now I would introduce Dr. Nurun Nahar. So Dr. Nurun Nahar, she is Joint Chief of the Programs Division at the Planning Commission of Bangladesh. And she will speak on Delta Plan. Nurun Nahar, she is in the General Economic Division and the Agriculture, Water Resources, and Rural Institutions Division, and the Socio-Economic Infrastructure Development of the Planning Commission, which is the vital part of our Planning Commission. So Dr. Nurun Nahar has also worked for UNDP and published many integrated studies on topic of rural and urban poverty and socio-economic impacts on water challenges. So I would request Dr. Nurun Nahar to put lights more on Delta Plan 2100.
Thank you very much, sir, for introducing me. Sir, this is an honor to be speaking here. A respected chair and my panelists and all the participants of this webinar, welcome. I'm Nurun Nahar, sir. I'd just like to add that now I'm also, yes, I'm working in Planning Commission, but now as Additional Secretary, and right now I'm working in Programming Division of Planning Commission, which looks after the ADP formulation under the national budget. So I will just talk about the Delta Plan and how we are trying to implement it and how we want to interlink it with our planning and budgeting system, and so that the objectives and strategies of the plan can be implemented. At the same time, how the challenges are maintained, challenges are addressed. So very shortly, as time is short, I would like to say that, you know, the Delta Plan, what is the ambitions of the Delta Plan? It is a long-term vision for the country. So the importance of the plan is that it is a visionary. So we have to think of it as a visionary plan, and the results will sustain up to a century, the year 2100. And when the plan was approved in 2018, it was termed by our Honorable Prime Minister as the best gift for the future generation by the present generation. So we have to think about what we as a generation can do to give sustainable results or sustainable output for future generation, next generation. Because Bangladesh is in a very vulnerable position in terms of geographic location. It is always vulnerable to all kinds of natural hazards, calamities, as we know, because of its location in the South Asia, and it is the biggest delta. And we all know that its water is a very huge and important resource of the country, and this is recognized in the Delta Plan. So it is one of the important delta. Bangladesh is one of the important dynamic delta of the world. And being a small country in the South Asia region, it covers, for example, we all know about the GMB, the Ganga, Jamuna, Meghna Basin, and about, I think, 7% of the water, even it being a huge area, only 7%, even that is a lot for Bangladesh that comes down to Bangladesh. And we know there are like 57 rivers that are transboundary in nature, international rivers. And within the small country, we have 700 more rivers crisscrossing the country, and the regular floods and the huge amount of sedimentation that is crossing the country down to the Bay of Bengal. But this is also a hazard as well as an opportunity. That's why the Delta Plan was formulated, just considering the geophysical features and the climate change as a risk on this small country, and how the Bangladesh can progress to become a middle income country, and also a developed country by the year 2041. So the opportunities, I would say that being a delta, we have fertile land. We have so many rivers, and that gives us ample opportunity for communication. We have the Bay of Bengal, and we have the Sundarbans, and we have the ecology variations in our ecological systems. We have the ecological critical areas that gives rich biodiversity, and very important for our livelihoods to keep our nations, sustained. Yeah. So with this in mind, the Delta plan was formulated with 6 hotspots in mind, covering the whole of Bangladesh. So no area of Bangladesh is left out. So I'll just mention a few numbers. What is the vision? It is achieving safe, climate resilient, and prosperous Delta in one sentence. And this plan is aspiring for 3 national goals, as I just mentioned. One is to be a middle income country by 2030. Another is the prosperous country by 2041. And the other is to eliminate poverty by 2030. So it is just a few minutes ago, Honorable Ambassador, His Excellency mentioned about linkages between the plans. So this plan has already linked with the ongoing planning system of Bangladesh. So we must understand there is a very robust national planning system that has been ongoing since the independence of Bangladesh through the Planning Commission that was established in 1972. So this long-term plan is connected to the medium-term 5-year plans. And the Delta plan itself has 6 very Delta goals. So I just don't want, like, for example, covering the floods, water security, the river systems, wetlands, water governance, transborder water resource management, and also how we can optimize the use of our land and the overall water resources. So there are these 6 goals. And when formulating the goals, the threat of the climate change was always considered, and we know the reports from the IPCC, the AR5 and AR6, that is constantly, that is a proof that gives us the scientific data on the climate change due to man-made reasons, that the temperature will increase. We will have very erratic rainfall, or precipitation patterns will change. That will cause more disasters, frequent disasters, more impactful disasters, such as, cyclone, floods, erosion, and like flash floods, and so on, even causing sea level rise. So these, again, will impact the fertile delta of Bangladesh. So, impacting the livelihoods in each of the sectors. What are the sectors? These are the agriculture sectors, our infrastructure, our transport, and our environment, and food security, and so on. So I would just like to point out, this is one of the major features of the Delta plan, how it integrated the climate change scenarios into the planning. And doing this, we have to remember that there are 2 scenarios. One is the business as usual. I think it's a very talked about scenario that we cannot think about the business as usual scenario, maybe for the short term. So in the Delta plan, it identifies, okay, we can have business as usual for short term, but if we follow the Delta adaptive management policies, then that will increase the chance of increasing our GDP. Then if we just stick to our business as usual policy, it says in the plan that we will have, like, our GDP maybe up to 5.6% by 2041 because of the climate change impacts and other calamities. But with the adapted Delta management policy of the Delta plan, we can increase it by more. That is our target, not just managing our Delta resources, but we have to keep in mind and how we can maintain the economic growth. So this is one of the, I think, main attractiveness, or I would say a plus point of the Delta plan, not just managing the natural resources, the livelihoods, but also thinking about where are the engines of economic growth. It talks about the blue economy and so on. And one other is that looking ahead, forecasting. So it also teaches us how we can look ahead up to 30 years, 50 years ahead, where we want to be, and then back calculate to our present position. So what are the challenges there? And it also tells us not to go by silo approach, by programmatic approach with several ministries in one program, multi-sectoral, multi-agencies, and monitoring the results at a periodical interval. The Delta Plan has introduced indicators that are not just Delta Plan indicators, but integrated in our ongoing 5-year plan national planning indicators. I may mention that we are now doing the 8th 5-year plan, and it has a very robust, I would say, indicator framework that is about 104 indicators covering the monitoring framework, and out of that, Delta Plan indicators are included. So that is one way how the Delta Plan vision or issues are integrated in the ongoing midterm 5-year plan. So there are many issues there. Climate change is covering in the issues of the Delta Plan, the hotspot basis in 6 hotspots areas. That is a key feature of Delta Plan, and it so in all the hotspot areas, water management is discussed very, I would say, very rigorously and strategically. So there are strategies and sub-strategies for each of the hotspot, how to manage the water resource in each of the sectors, and also the our hotspots. For example, we have the drought region in the north area that we see the burden of the flood area in the middle, and the coastal area and the south, and we have the hill track. So each area, the water situation is different, how the water acts with the people or use different, and the Delta Plan rightly identifies the strategies for catering to each of the sectors and as well as the hotspots. And just mention the 6 hotspot. Also, urban is considered another hotspot. And while having those strategies, it says that we have to go for short, then medium to long term. Now we're having a midterm plan, and we hope again we'll have a 9th 5-year plan from July 25. That is going to be introduced by General Economics Division. And again, that there the Delta Plan targets and strategies and the projects will again be reviewed and introduced to our annual planning process, that is the annual development plan. An annual development program or plan is part of our national budget. That is the main source of the Delta projects. And there is a target in the plan to have 2.5% of the GDP ensured for the Delta Plan implementation. So we hope by like 2030-31, we can manage from both government and private, and also from the development partners, a resource that will lead, that will be about 2.5% of the GDP. And I would just like to mention that lastly, my last point is that what are we doing so far? Just not a plan that's sitting there. So there are many projects identified, like 80 projects in each of the 6 hotspots and in the covering the strategies. And we have 15 sectors in our economy. So these projects cover all the sectors, and mostly are like in infrastructure related projects, and some are very capacity building and information systems development projects. And we have already some projects by the Global Green Climate Fund. So that is another source of our finance that could finance the Delta projects. And they're also looking at the water issues there. For example, local government engineering department is doing a climate resilient infrastructure mainstreaming project. And also we have a joint project with the Ministry of Women Affairs and DPHE, that's the Public Health Engineering Department, doing a project that enhances the resilience, the capacity of women for a water security. And also there is a project by PKSF, that is the Extended Community Climate Change project on flood related. So these projects are rightly selected, and we hope we are very catered to the Delta objectives. And we hope the results which we will get by end of 2023 or 24, then lead to our next phase of the projects, and also development partners like World Bank. There are many here, many more projects, but I will not just go on with the list, but just to say that each of the developed partners, when we do the budget or we do a national plan, there is a review, a development forum that discuss how the development partner as a community can finance which area of a national plan. So Delta plan is already there. So World Bank is, for example, doing a drainage infrastructure project and that increases the resiliency of the embankment system and the polders, protection from the tidal flooding, and so on. There are many more examples. So these are examples showing that this plan is helping our development partners to identify and link the objectives and the goals of the Delta plan to their own development ideas and everything. So last is that I will say that while we are going to include 80 projects yearly, there are 17 investment projects in our annual development program, and we hope in Planning Commission through the formulation of a appraisal framework, a Delta appraisal framework, and we already have a Delta wing in Planning Commission and a Delta Council, and also in the future maybe a special Delta fund. We can increase very specifically the projects that are very directly linked to the Delta plan or fulfills the objectives of our national goals as well as the Delta goals. So with this, I would like to end my discussion here and look forward to the question answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nurunhar. Very rightly, you have mentioned that Delta plan is a strategic plan. Though there are some projects are included in the document, that these are not the exhaustive list. And you rightly mentioned that Delta plan is based on water, and it implements starting from the yearly budget, then 5-year plan, then the strategic plan 2041, and finally 2100. So, Dr. Nurunhar, I believe that this Delta plan relates to the river basin-wide management of the water, because huge quantity of water and silt comes the Dr. Nurunhar.
Sir, could you please repeat the question? I could not get it due to the network.
Basin-wide management,
Yes.
basin-wide management in terms of the Delta plan.
Yes, so that is also covered in the Delta plan. So we have the ministries. So that there also I would not say the word dictate, it gives some guideline how the activities under each of the strategies will be designed. So then the role lies with each of the ministries. And which are the ministries? Not just Ministry of Water Resources. Of course, for this basin-wide water management, we will need Ministry of Water's full action and identifying the right projects, and also for Planning Commission to ensure that the budget is there for implementation of that project and ensured in our national yearly budget. And also, I think there's a role of because we have transboundary rivers, and we need to not Indian Myanmar, and also we need to increase our engagement with our neighbors, and for how we can manage that water. We already know the problems are there. What new technologies can we bring? So development partners can suggest us something. And so these are some trial and error. We can have better management in the basin-wide management of our water. And also to finally, I would say we need to increase overall finance for these the Delta plan. That means we need more bilateral and multilateral intervention. So our Ministry of Foreign Affairs plays a vital role here. And we are nearing the end of 2023, but next year, sir, the government of Bangladesh will engage with all our development partners to review, like, well, what are the priority areas for our Delta plan, and how we are going to end the 850 plan, and how the water management will be seen, or what key activities we need to do. So through more engagement with our development partners and capacity building of the ministry, especially Ministry of Water Resource and its departments, so we can have very successful, I think, activities to fulfill the water goals in Delta plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nona. Thank you for your intervention. Now, dear participants, to move to our Ms. Katrina Savan. She's a researcher with city and climate and land use change, implications of water and food security. So the issues which she will understand that these will be over the last 30 years, she have worked on water management for food security in various like Bangladesh, Vietnam, Botswana, and Egypt. She is affiliated with King University and agriculture and water management issues of Bangladesh related experience. Ms. Katrina.
Sorry, I think, Katharina, could you hear Mr. Azad there?
Not in full. Thank you very much for giving me the floor, but I think there was some network problem, but I understood that Mr. Abul Kalam Azad introduced me and highlighted how I have been involved over the last 30 years with various issues in water management and food security, also related to Bangladesh. If I may, I would now like to start my presentation.
Yes, please. And thank you for just reiterating a few pieces of your bio. I'll also post Katarina's bio in the chat, just in case anyone else kind of missed that when Azad was cutting out a little bit. Sorry, go ahead, Katarina.
Okay, you always will see that then you won't find the screen you immediately want. I'm putting it in presentation modus. Can you see the presentation modus? Yeah, I see Ambassador Riyadh nodding. So, well, like more people, I also have a bit of sore throat. The dust of Dhaka combined with the air conditioning and a lot of talking is not so very favorable. But I'm enormously pleased that I can join you here today. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'll talk about climate and land use changes and implications for water and food security in Bangladesh. My name is Catherine Tereska van Scheldenga. I work with Wageningen University and Research in the Netherlands. And originally I'm trained in irrigation and soil and water conservation. My talk will be mainly about interlinkages. Though I am trying to understand the situation, it does not mean that I know everything. And Bangladesh is a very dynamic country. You can learn every day new things. What we try to do with our research is we try to make useful answers or methodologies that, for instance, policymakers can use for understanding and also for their decision making. Wageningen is in the Netherlands, and basically we have 3 different areas in which we work. The production of food, the nutrition of food, but also the environment and the landscape. And integration is a very important part of what we are aiming for. I should not forget to mention that we have an international student challenge, which starts in November, where all students can participate, but I hope to come back at the end shortly to that. Wageningen is over the last 10 years closely engaged in various work on either water management, climate change adaptation, or food security in Bangladesh. I'm not going through this list in light of time, but coming straight to the matter. That's if you think about climate change, what is happening, that it's not so easy also to understand what is exactly the matter, because the country has very particular pattern also of rainfall or temperature, which may be very different in different places. But overall, it is expected that the total amount of rain is to go up, which is in a way a luxury situation. However, that does not automatically mean a better situation for farmers. I just last week was at ICWFM 9. This is a major water conference here in Dhaka. And for instance, they showed us facts how the extreme events, the intensity of the extreme events, those with a higher, like 400 millimeter rainfall events may go up, the number, but the number of events with 200 millimeter may go down. So altogether, it means you might get a lot of rain in one go, and then a long time you may not have rain. So it's more uncertain, and the pattern also is more uncertain. Then simultaneously, you have also other change, like for instance, land use change. Cities are increasing, and then the forest, nature, and wetlands are decreasing. Also, agricultural land is decreasing. So from less land, in a way, farmers are producing more food. And that, in a way, also in a context where the diet is changing. So now you can see that this is a kind of complex situation, because if those things are changing at a time, well, whatever kind of good scientist, there is not one single scientist who can capture all these changes easily in one go. So this also shows, like what Dr. Nurul Nahar also said, that we must need to work together from the different sectors and try to get plans accordingly. So then we also will need to collect data and facts, which is also, again, not so easy. I'm showing you a land use classification map in which, together with colleagues, we combined existing databases, downscaled, but you see how much differences there are in different places. I kind of enlarge a small bit, and the reddish part is the city, the greenish part, the forest, blue is for the water, but it's not so easy to kind of come to a plan, while at a national level you would wish to make a plan. Also at a local level you need to make a plan, but then how to connect the plans, and do you have data at each of the levels that is relevant for making such plans. For instance, salinity, which was also mentioned as one of the issues, this will not be less. However, there is water salinity, there is soil salinity. The salinity situation changes throughout the year. The salinity situation is increasingly over the years. So I cannot show you kind of single good maps to show you the matter, though we know how complex the issue is. Currently, we are working from Wageningen side, for instance, on a global hotspot map for salinity. Well, this would also be interesting to kind of see whether we can link this with national level existing data to see whether we can find that. Because once we can establish, based on existing data sets, where the hotspots are, and if we can assess what kind of damage that could cause for agriculture, then we can also assess for the future what that could mean. However, still a lot of work to be done, but that's not for a policymaker a good message if a researcher says that they want to do more research, because for a policymaker, they need to move, they need to take decisions. But we are looking here for a picture of Dhaka. If you think about the last 50 years, how much the city has changed until where we are today, then also you will understand how much it may change more in the coming 50 years. So this situation with uncertainty and complexity, how do we tackle that? So like how it was done for the Delta Plan, with thinking about the present situation, having a vision for the future, and then backcasting and making stepwise plans, like how it was also explained. It's linked to the 5-year planning cycle. On the bottom right, I also put a kind of transition curve where you can see that if you are over time changing from one situation to another situation, for that future situation, you might not know exactly how the situation looks like, but it also is that in the course of the time, you would wish to engage with different people in that process, because there's not one single entity who kind of does the whole process. It's different organizations together who will make the change together. So for water and food, we looked in particular in what we call a food system approach, where we combine aspects of the value chain, the socio-environmental factors, the socio-economic and environmental factors together to see how we can balance the trade-offs of different goals in such a complex situation. And though we do not have kind of straight guidelines for this, what to do exactly, it already helped us a lot to bring together in one frame, for instance, economists and livestock specialists and agriculture people and water managers, because they can understand where they are in this concept, and then also we can try to have integrated knowledge for the next step. I want to give you an example on that, for instance, with the Delta Plan, like it was already explained by Dr. Nurul Nahar, it's the 100-year plan, and there are scenarios, but now in a way, how then would that translate for the different regions or for the different sectors? So what we try to do together with Solidaridad, we looked at for the Southwestern region on how different elements combine. So there is a map that Solidaridad made together with their stakeholders on what future activities could look like. And we tried with the knowledge that we could bring together to provide an underpinning for that, and then to see what are the transition pathways. So if I look, for instance, at the combination of dairy and salinity, the market, in a way, in Southwest for cattle, the market for milk is kind of increasing because cities are increasing and GDP is increasing. So in a way, it looks good to have more cattle. However, cattle also need safe drinking water. And if due to increasing salinity, the water is saline, well, cattle cannot drink salt water. And at the same time, also the fodder cultivation you need to look into. There, in the middle bottom picture, you do see Napier grass. People did start cultivating grass as for fodder for cattle. In a way, grass is more salt tolerant than rice, so it could be a good option. So these things, by kind of combining the different drivers and aspects together in a picture where we not only look now but also at the future, we can think about what could be the transition pathway for cattle, dairy, in combination with the salinity situation. I also mentioned road development and personal circumstances because there are also other drivers in people's life. And the road development will be obvious to all of you who know about the Potma Bridge this big bridge, impressive work that Bangladesh has completed, which will totally transform the Southwest area in the coming years. Now, when you think about the national scale level for making plans for the future and thinking through the transition pathways, we also thought that what do, in a way, farmers then think about it? So what we did is we talked with farmers to collect their perceptions at the field scale level in low, medium, and high saline zones. And we asked the different kind of farmers related to different activities like agriculture, livestock, shrimp, and also with regard to their drinking water. Obviously, the drinking water situation is the most pressing, urgent matter, but also the other three sectors are highly affected by salinity. And what we see in a way is that farmers in general, they would wish to continue farming. However, they also wish their children to be educated and do other things as well. They expect that technology will kind of are developed and come forward that will assist in this regard. So altogether, we think it will be interesting to think about pathways together with different stakeholders, and we developed a guideline how that can be done. And wouldn't it be great if when agriculture transition is taking shape currently, how it could then be aligned with the Delta Plan so that there would be a kind of joint benefit from both plans moving in the same direction. So in our research also, we think further steps. We see that this alignment between BDP and agriculture transformation would be a very interesting thing to look at, as well as this international, national, local linkage, for instance, on salinity, like I mentioned. Also, the information services for farmers are an important step because we see that sometimes the climate, we cannot stop the climate change, but if we can capacitate farmers how to deal with it, that could be a very important way to, at some crucial moments, save their production. And I like to mention the youth. I think youth is kind of crucial in Bangladesh. Youth is kind of creating the next generation. They are highly focal on climate change. Wouldn't it be great if we had e-learning on the Delta Plan and on these matters of water and food alignment? So in summary, I think to me, it is clear that water and food decisions are interrelated, and this systems approach is a kind of promising to tackle these things. Climate and land use change are happening simultaneously, and we need to kind of study, collect data, and monitor for those developments in parallel with the implementation. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, and I should mention the International Student Challenge. All the students from anywhere in the world are invited to think along on nature-based future solutions with a focus on deltas, with a focus on Bangladesh this year. We are expecting inspiring new examples coming up from the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. You have very rightly identified the heavy rain and also salinity and how to build the capacity of the farmers and especially youth, e-learning. I believe you know very recently the initiative of the Smart Bangladesh. So smart citizen, smart society, smart economy, and smart government. And there, in the smart society, it is told about the my village, my town. That is the nature of village needs to bring in town, and the facilities of town needs to take into the villages. Thank you. Thank you for your interventions. And I believe the youth especially will be much more interested to get opportunity to study in your university and research. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Now I would request Mr. Haseen, Miss Haseen Zahan. Miss Haseen Zahan, she is the working in the Water Aid Bangladesh. This Water Aid Bangladesh, Hasin is basically civil engineer and having expertise in water and environment management. She has progressive career in the development sector and is recognized as an influential development expert for promoting gender equality and youth empowerment. She worked for local government engineering department, which we call LGED, DANIDA, the World Bank, and the international non-government organization in our country. Also now she is in practical action. Currently she is leading design and development of local-led water and sanitation provisions and approaches for enhancing resilience of the climate impact communities in Bangladesh. So, Ms. Hasin Zahan, can you please put lights on especially your activities in Water Aid Bangladesh? Hasin.
Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be here and be able to speak in this webinar. Let me try to upload and screen share first, and then I will quickly move on. Please confirm me whether you are seeing me right and the slides are okay.
Yes, it looks good.
Thank you.
Yes,
welcome
sure.
everyone. Welcome everyone. And I'll be very happy to present how Water Aid is implementing locally led adaptation in Bangladesh. Since Water Aid's mandate is largely on water sanitation and hygiene, so I will be presenting here today how we are implementing locally led adaptation and the case centered around the people in coastal belt of Bangladesh. So let me start with a little bit of context. I'll be very brief just to try to link between WASH, climate change, and how we do it. And I'll be presenting a case at the end. So when I talk about the context, I believe that all of us actually know about the generic implications of climate change in Bangladesh. And nothing new to add, like we have already heard from Dr. Nurul Nahar Catherine and His Excellency Ambassador, the issues like seawater rise, saline intrusion in the coastal belt, increased frequency and intensity of disasters like cyclones, flood, etc. All are there in Bangladesh, putting toll on people's life and well-being. Let me kind of summarize the things in a way that still, if I just want to relate with the water sanitation hygiene, in short WASH, still more than 3 million people lack clean water. More than 75 million people lack decent toilets. Due to climate change impacts, as the frequency of cyclone are increasing, the water and sanitation infrastructure of poor households get damaged almost every year. And people do not have the financial capacity to rebuild those. It means that climate change has direct impacts on the number of people under SDG targets. So let me also suggest a very simple possible solutions from one of Water Aid studies that shows that if we can invest $1 in advance for making the WASH infrastructure resilient at the first place, we can easily avoid spending of $62 in the work of restoration after any cyclone or flood. Here comes the issue of climate financing for locally led adaptation. And now what sort of approach Water Aid is adopting? Earlier, we mostly adopted anticipatory adaptation for building climate resilient WASH infrastructure. And now we have improvised our approach and added vulnerability and needs assessments for creating a pathway towards transformative change. And we actually titled our whole approach in the name of Participatory Ward Vulnerability Assessment. Let me explain a bit. Ward means the lowest formal administrative boundary in Bangladesh. So we are thinking and we are practicing to make one plan for one ward, and this plan will be a holistic one. So, and this PWVA, I mean, this approach incorporates indigenous knowledge of the local people in planning and managing the whole thing. Through our approach PWVA, we actually try to connect the local people from the very lowest tier and get along with them throughout the pathway according to LLA principles. The PWVA approach has been already documented by our partner Rupantar, Sanitation Learning Hub, the Institute of Development Studies and University of Sydney. So it's all there in the online. If you want, you can go through and learn more about it. But in nutshell, what it is. So if you kind of break down the PWVA in a simple language, we can say that it's a bottom-up approach where community actually identifies their own vulnerabilities. They determine their challenges. They figure out their requirements. They understand their capacity and they plan. And they plan for their whole administrative boundary within the jurisdiction of government like ward. So they make a plan for the ward. And though we are a WASH-focused organization, this plan doesn't reflect only WASH. This can reflect anything that features are important for that particular area. If I recall Nurun Nahar's presentation, she mentioned that Delta Plan is a very strategic, high-profile document. So how this strategic document needs to be translated at ground, this could be one way that we engage local to national level linkage through planning process. So one word planning can go up to that level as well. So this can be a forward-looking thing. The way Catherine actually mentioned in her presentation that she wants to look at agricultural transition, and a major part of agricultural transition is definitely connected with water. So if the people of the same ward is planning for holistically, be that for agriculture, wash, fisheries, health, education, transport, so they can come up with a comprehensive planning that can connect us to the vision, and which is important. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can start with this bottom-up approach and we link with the top. And you can quickly have a look to one of the hand-drawn maps, not all, how it does look like. Now I will be saying you or reflecting you about an approach that we introduced in our working area as a case, how we engage women entrepreneurs for women empowerment. So let me give a little bit of background and how it does relate with the PWVA approach. Through PWVA, which is a kind of one planning for a ward, it came up as an obvious requirement from the community that there is a drinking water crisis in coastal belt, and they really need to provide water at affordable cost. And for that, they identified that water business is important that will allow us to get water at an affordable price. And centering around this idea, this WIWI approach, I mean, water entrepreneurship for women empowerment approach, has been evolved in Water Aid over the time. And now it took a kind of formal shape. So again, let me explain very quickly that all the LLA principles had been reflected in this WIWI approach, because the community, they identified their problem like the scarcity of water, requirement of water business. The women volunteered that who will be joining this entrepreneurship journey and how they will run the business, how much money they will borrow from where, and how they will invest, how they will expand business, how they will connect revenue, share profit, and so many things. So it's their decision. They are doing it by themselves. They are the change maker. They are connecting with the local government and so on. Now, what is our role as an NGO and our partner's role as a local stakeholder? We actually support or offer them the facilitation role. We bring them together, help them to brainstorm, smoothen the access to financial resources and so on. But ultimately, it's them who are managing and leading the process. And our job is build their capacity and providing them hand-holding support. And now these groups are more or less took a shape. And there are definitely issues how we will sustain them in the long run. I'll come back to that in a second. And as a success, we always tell that this lady, you can see the picture of her, Geeta Roy, she actually, one of the WE ladies, has been elected as the representative in the local government body. So we can see how empowerment is happening at local level. However, the most important challenge is there how to sustain such locally led initiatives. There are still a long way to go. We have to provide them hand-holding support and up to a threshold level so that they can sustain. And when we really talk about full localization, the issue of climate finance is obvious. And if you look at the prospect of climate finance in the horizon, sorry to say that it is yet to be there. And all of us know that globally less than 3% climate finance is being allocated for water sector, whereas water is the lifeline of the world and the most impacted element of climate change. And all of us know about the missing link. Money is perhaps sitting in the top. And we are also expecting at the same time that locally led adaptation will come from the bottom. But how to merge between the two? How to merge the strategy and operational mode together? There is definitely a challenge. However, if we really want to see the locally led adaptation to sustain, we need to figure out how we can support such homegrown solutions to sustain long. In conclusion, I would like to iterate that there are several examples of locally led adaptation. I just presented one, but now time has come to strategize ourselves how we can go for horizontal and vertical integration towards the sustainability of the locally led adaptation and utilize climate finance to the base system. So that's all from my end. Thank you for your patience. I am now stop sharing. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Hasin Zan. You have very rightly mentioned about the WASH and also one plan for one word, excellent. And also you mentioned about the local level empowerment. Also you indicated on the finance. We understand that local led adaptation is the key. And how do you take this to scale up, especially with the international finance and support? Can you put light on that?
I'm conscious about time, so let me quickly touch upon the issue. As we all agree that locally led adaptation is the key, the first thing or the starting point must be awareness raising. Because still, to be honest, many of us are in the kind of typical project mode. But if we want to really promote locally led adaptation, we have to educate the community first. Make them believe that it's you, not us. Educate the local stakeholders to take their ownership and put the local government in the driving seat and re-educate our partners and ourselves to learn about our role, that we should be playing the role of facilitators, mentors for their hand-holding support. This is number one. The second thing, which is critically important to strengthen the local capacity, technology transfer, knowledge transfer, so that the local people and the local stakeholders, they actually become robust. And third thing, which is essentially important, to make the finance flow easier, if needed, we can think of adding multi-level governance, but the most important thing that we should define an easier way to put the money to the people who actually need that. We can think of the governance aspect, definitely, but the process should not be stringent enough to restrict the growth or reaching to them. So that's 3 key points from my end now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hasin-san, taking the resource near to the people, those who are suffering most. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I would go to our the final panelist, I believe. This is Mr. Tanim Ishtiaq. Tanim is the Senior Program Officer, Infrastructure and Nature-Based Solution, Stress Testing Infrastructure and Nature-Based Solution. So Tanim Ishtiaq is serving as a Senior Program Officer at the GCA, Global Center on Adaptation, and specializing in infrastructure and nature-based solution. At GCM, Tanim is working with international financial institutions, including the African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, and also World Bank, to integrate practice and financially viable adaptation strategies into large-scale infrastructure projects across Africa, South Asia, and small island developing states. Tanim holds an MBA and an engineering degree. So Tanim, how do you see this adaptation plan and your activities which relates to Bangladesh and the rest part of the globe?
Thank you, sir. It's an honor to be here in front of such an esteemed panelist. So I'm just going to share my screen so that I can present the slides that I prepared for this. So I'm Tanim Ishtiaq, and I'm working as a Senior Program Officer at the GCA in the Infrastructure Nature-Based Solution Program. Today, I'm going to cover the National Infrastructure Stress Test that we are conducting in Bangladesh, the first part of which was completed last year. So the main objective of the stress testing the infrastructure system in Bangladesh was first to quantify the infrastructure networks, the climate change vulnerabilities of the infrastructure network, and then to prioritize investment based on the data that we had from the vulnerability assessment, and then to use the data to support national stakeholders so that they can actually incorporate climate resilience into their infrastructure sector. So the whole project was co-led by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of Government of Bangladesh and Global Center on Adaptation, and was funded by the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management of the Netherlands. So before I go into the details, maybe I need to introduce a little bit of what Global Center on Adaptation is. So Global Center on Adaptation is basically a global organization specializing in climate adaptation. So we have offices all over the world, headquartered in Netherlands, where I'm based in, and then Africa, South Asia, and Asia Pacific. So we work to accelerate adaptation agenda through 3 strategic approaches. The first one is advocacy and agenda setting, where we work with the policymakers to drive the adaptation agenda. And the second one is knowledge, where we bridge the gap between science and practice by generating knowledge. And then third one is program, where we help countries to introduce and incorporate systematic resilience into their 6 sectors where we work in. So among those 6 sectors, the one where I work in, infrastructure nature-based solution, we work with countries across 3 business lines. The first one, where we help countries to incorporate climate resilience into national infrastructure assets and also pipelines. The second one, where we work across assets to introduce climate adaptation solutions into the design and implementation of the asset investment. And finally, we also build capacity of public sector and private sector so that the adaptation solutions can be incorporated into the public and private infrastructure projects. And at the same time, the finance for adaptation solutions can be mobilized through public, private, and international fronts. So moving on to the stress test, first I want to briefly go over to the through the approaches that we adopted for the stress test. It was co-led by the Global Center on Adaptation and Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. It was the technical work was carried out by the University of Oxford, UNOPS, and CEGIS, which is based in Bangladesh. So we assessed climate risks of 4 different climate hazards: coastal flooding, riverine flooding, coastal erosion, and cyclone across 4 different sectors of infrastructure. We had continuous consultations with the Ministry of Environment, with different implementation agencies of Bangladesh, and also different technical farms and persons. And we actually developed the climate risk assessment based on continuous collaboration with the government. After we finished the climate risk assessment last year, we are now continuing with the prioritization of the adaptation solutions that are based on the data that we have right now. And in the future, that will help the government to implement the adaptation solutions, as well as integrate them into key national plans and policies, and at the same time also mobilize finances for implementation. So this is just the broad overview of what we did. We first took 4 climate hazards and then created spatial maps for those hazards, and then we created damage curve for those hazards to determine how much damage they will cause to the infrastructure sector. And then we took the data and tried to understand what kind of impact they will have on the households, and the disruption of the infrastructure, how they will impact the SDG implementation, SDG achievement of Bangladesh. So these are broadly the infrastructure assets that we consider. There are 2 types of infrastructure assets here. One is nodes, which is basically, for example, a dot in the map, like a power plant, an airport, etc. And at the same time, there are some networks as well, such as roads, railway lines. In the transport sector, we mostly focus on the roads, railway lines, and airports and water ports. At energy sector, we focus on the electricity and gas. And then in social sector, we consider a wide range of infrastructure assets, such as healthcare facilities, hospitals, cyclone shelters, and economic centers, such as market centers, and also educational facilities. So moving on to the findings, if I look at the right side of my screen, you can see that it lists the exposure of different infrastructure assets to coastal and riverine floodings. So the exposure listed here is in 2050. So by 2050, you can see that among all the roads all over the country, almost like 20% of the roads will be exposed to coastal hazard, and to riverine flooding, almost more than 20% of the roads will be exposed to. And if you move right, you will see that some of the numbers do add up to more than 100%, because some ports, some inland water terminals, and some infrastructure assets are actually exposed to both types of flooding in 2050. So the exposure value actually does not tell much, because we know that 2 different assets can be exposed to the same hazards, but the impact of the hazards on the asset will not be the same. So what we did try to calculate the economic damage that the hazard will cause to the infrastructure asset. And we saw that in 2050, in the second half of this century, coastal flooding will likely cause around 9 billion of economic damage to the whole infrastructure network that we considered, and the riverine flooding will close to 7.6 billion of economic damage annually. If we consider the current GDP of Bangladesh, that is 400 billion euro. This is like 4% of the current GDP of Bangladesh, which is really high. And we are only talking about 2 hazards and a few infrastructure sectors. And how will this damage will actually impact the households? so we saw that in the coastal region, there are around 9 million households there, and almost all of the household will be exposed to at least one of the 4 climate hazards that we considered. And that's not all. The poorest community, the poorest of those regions will be the most impacted, because the rich will have enough resources and means to move and relocate to a better position, and the poor will suffer the most. And at the same time, when an infrastructure, for example, a road is down, the communities cannot reach to the nearest healthcare facilities, education facilities, and nearest economic centers. So it will impact the achievement of SDGs of Bangladesh. In the right, there is a map which highlights that how much the districts will be impacted by the infrastructure disruption because of climate change, and it highlights the SDG, decent work and economic growth. So if we move on to, if we zoom in more, this is actually some of the, if you look at the right side map, you can see that we highlighted some of the most vulnerable upajalas in terms of infrastructure damage in the right. This is not a comprehensively, this is just for illustration. And we have the data to actually understand that which regions are most vulnerable to different climate hazard and which assets in which region are actually most vulnerable. Based on those, we are now trying to understand which assets and which adaptation solutions should be prioritized in different regions, so that government can actually use the strong national plans, climate change national plans and policies to mobilize finance for those projects. So I will briefly stop and then reflect on what we learned from this work. So first of all, what we actually learned is this stress test is a top-down work. So basically we did this in national level, but when we are going for the implementation, when someone goes to implement it, national level work is not enough. They need to also approach the projects from bottom up. The locally led identification and prioritization is very important. The consultation with local community is very important, and the bottom up and top down approach will meet somewhere in the middle, where the implementation should be more efficient and most impactful. And we also noticed another thing was that there are robust national plans and policies of Bangladesh government, and there are robust sectoral plans and policies, but there are some misalignment, not much, but some misalignment among the sectors, which causes problems for some of the implementation. For example, when a road is exposed to a flooding hazard, the common practice is to elevate the road, increase the bridge size, culvert size, improve the drainage system, etc. But doing so, the road is protected from the flood, but the water ends up in elsewhere. For example, it can impact agricultural lands and farming, etc. So a closer collaboration is needed to actually minimize the overall climate change impact in the national, subnational, and also municipal level. And finally, one of the ways to bridge the gap will be to build capacity. The capacity gap is there, but is slowly, the gap is shortening. So putting more effort into building capacity will play a key role in ensuring the systematic resilience in Bangladesh. So that is a short overview of what we did in last year, the stress test. Currently, we are now prioritizing based on the data we have, and we are also closely working with the government so that it can inform the national plans and policies. So that is all from me. If there is any question, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Bottom up and top down were these giants for the better development of our country. We are almost at the fag end of our discussion. We had some set questions. I will not ask all the questions. Just I will ask two questions. One to Catherine. Catherine, can you think on for other deltas adapting to climate change around the globe? what is the key water-linked adaptation lessons learned in Bangladesh? Can you put some example of some light on it? Catherine.
Yes, thank you very much, sir, for asking me the question. I do think it's a kind of $100 million question after the last presenter. That if we have the good answers to questions, that would very be important. But let me keep it small. Let me keep it to myself. If you would ask me the question, what is the key lesson to be learned to me is about integration. That water alone cannot do the job. Water is very important and very central in the country. But for instance, with regard to agriculture and food, water is essential. So to me, for anywhere in the world, if you work on water, if you work on longer term plan, take agriculture and food into account immediately from the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. The last question to the panel. How could initiatives like the IPDC, that you see IPDC, this panel, they are working great. A series of 4 webinars. This is the second webinar, and we will be seeing the next 2 webinars very soon. So how could initiatives like the IPDC link effectively into ongoing work to work in unison on shared objectives? So Haseen or Dr. Nahar and Ambassador Riaz Hamidullah, you can speak on it. Just 1 minute each, if possible.
Do
you want
Father, if there's no one else, then
okay, yes.
Let me first see if someone else.
I think let me think whether Haseen or Dr. Nahar they want to take floor, or then I will give you the floor.
So I
Haseen, do you want to speak on it?
Yeah, I think I will only say one issue highlight that as Naharappa said, that this Delta plan or whatever, these are very high profile strategic document. And those are content rich, forward looking, excellent document. But if you really want to bring it down, we need to add the human interface there. And we need to address social equity, inclusion, and the social aspect. So how we can blend this together, that should be our aim and suggestion. That's all.
That's great. That's great, Haseen. So, Dr. Nahar, do you want to add something?
Yes, I think this is an excellent can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think this is an excellent opportunity, for example, this webinar, because it just not just to highlight what the government of Bangladesh is doing in terms of planning, but how is it going to implement. Planning can be easy, but now we have to implement it, and we need the resources, and we need all the ideas and support from not just within the government, but for other partners in the INGOs, NGO sectors, our development partners, and their ideas. So that our plans so that they don't remain as a plan, but we can really implement it to achieve the goals, and all the ministries can actually within our own systems can do this new work, because thinking about water, room for water is kind of a new issue, and this discussion will really help to keep our feet solidly on the ground, rather than just thinking of some high level ideas. But we need to really keep our feet on the ground, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nahar. Ambassador Riaz Hamidullah.
I'll ask for a few minutes, sir. This is I think this is a central question, and coming after 1.5 hours of very intense reflection and perspectives that we surfaced. There are 2 aspects of it. First, BDP. One thing is very clear. The way we structure BDP, we see BDP in terms of 2 volumes, 80 projects. I'm afraid this is a time when it's coming for a significant, not review, significant, frank questioning. For example, 2013 onwards and 2018, when the cabinet approved the set of 80 indicative projects, you're right, sir. These are not exhaustive list of projects. One thing is very clear from Tanim and from Catherine, that the assumptions that we had in terms of structuring the projects, or the narrative part of it, I think these in the past 10 years, significantly these are to be tested. The knowledge bases, the reality is in the past 5 to 10 years have significantly changed. Urban heat is a reality. 2013-14, we didn't face it, for example. So many of the projects, not simply in terms of bankability, but in terms of assumptions, in terms of ground reality, in terms of the ways we work, in terms of the actors, for example, startups and impact investors were not there at that time, need to be seriously returned. That's something I would like to flag to the Planning Commission representative. At the same time, most of our projects are essentially, we are more driven by projectization. I think that is also would ask for, because that's coming from Dr. Haseen, or also capacity building, the way we understand, is it the same kind of capacity building in situ? Or the way we see the triple helix model, for example, the way universities, for example, if I go to southwestern Bangladesh, the universities don't have any foothold in the projects or so to say projects. So my submission would be, I think time for project need to be looked at. We need to bring in nexus approach more and more with this, because that is what will bring BDP and the IPDC together. So the simply put frame, which came up at the second, because Delta Plan has now gone into the second phase this February onwards. What came out is that there are 5 or 4 verticals that we need to look at. One is manufacturing. What is going to be the future of manufacturing vis-a-vis Bangladesh Delta Plan? What does the Delta Plan look at it? How does it look at it? What is going to be the future of millions of workers, not simply the youth, for example, entrepreneurs? So manufacturing is a key pillar, has to be there. Agriculture, not simply as agriculture plus agro-food system. Urbanization again intersecting the two. Then not lesser extent, but energy and transport logistics. But then what needs to cut across are another set of not horizontals, which are essentially youth, not youth, Catherine, I would say expand it more than what you said, but youth, women, and works, future of works. Entrepreneurship is going for a toss for certain. And then climate would be cross-cutting for that horizontal and vertical together. Now, that's why I'm saying, for example, if you see, sir, the sluice gates, let's say, the sluice gates that we build across Bangladesh, particularly in southwestern Bangladesh, in Delft, I'm being told that why does the sluice gates in Bangladesh rust? Whereas in Netherlands and many parts of the world, there are mixed alloys already available, which make the things resilient for 40, 50 years easily. Why does the tar in bitumen in our roads are so susceptible, sir? So, for example, if you go to food system, urbanization is going to make the thing topsy-turvy. 40% of Bangladesh is already in urban spaces, 48% to be by 2030. What kind of system, food, the supply chain, domestic supply chain I'm talking about, would have to be there? Now, agriculture, we look at essentially in terms of food security. Nutrition security is already reality. May not have been 10, 15 years back. But now, food security, nutrition security also to be seen in terms of resource security, natural resource security. Now, let me then connect. That's why my submission would be that we focus all the BDP projects more in terms of outcome, not output, not numbers. It's not. That's why I purposefully said upfront that we need to look at the trade-offs, choices, and inequality all across. Now, let me try to connect to IPDC. It's a long shot. Some of you may know, particularly the GCA and colleagues here. And my take on IPDC is as follows. That IPDC came, I recall exactly around this time when Minister Mark Herbers first said, we went to COP27 and we looked at IPDC as the next big thing to come. Not from, maybe from Netherlands, but essentially it went to UN Water Conference and the Connect. My take on IPDC, and then IPDC could complement the BDP, or BDP could actually contribute to IPDC, perhaps in a couple of ways. And that would be good for IPDC, that's also good for Delta Plan. How? In terms of how, my first thing would be, let IPDC come as a frame or space to pilot actions, not the ones based on the existing challenges, not to address the existing, as much as the existing challenges, but also the ones that are about to emerge. There should be a very strong layer of experimentation, which is often missing. If you only look at today's challenge, by the time we construct a project, by the time there's a time lag of 3 to 5 years, the reality would have changed. So we are on a constant Mickey Mouse kind of journey. We must avoid this, because we are saying that Delta Plan is about transformation. 100 years in a nation's lifetime is nothing compared to that. So piloting actions to test, adapt, create pathways on a constant basis. That element of dynamism is something that should be USP for IPDC. For example, in terms of testing salinity in Bangladesh, what kind of solutions, materials that could hold, what kind of seed would hold. So if that would help in terms of the agro-food layer, resilient water-intensive farming. We are thinking only in terms of water intensity, in terms of water efficiency for, let's say, manufacturing, for apparel industries. But no, but also in agriculture, for example. Particularly missing is the smallholders. What is Bangladesh? 70% of Bangladesh is smallholders, small and marginal farmers. So if we do not look at this, the approach smallholders, to my mind, has to be completely cross-cutting. Second, building bridges with the existing actors as stakeholders. GCF was mentioned. GCF is just one, for example. But then each of the agencies have their competencies, mandates, and also their strengths. How, for example, IPDC can be a space, or like Bazaar, where it can allow others to come with their strengths, but also to leverage with each other. And that's why I'm saying complementing. And also at the same time, we are not at all looking at unlocking we speak about reference to private sector. I said about the global private sector, Bangladeshi private sector, but what are the kind of concessional framework that is needed? What kind of incentive? There's no dialogue on them with them at all. That is very much needed. So if I look at a Dutch SME or innovator or a knowledge holder, I would say, I'll bring you to Bangladesh. So can you work in, let's say, deep south in Bangladesh to correct the salinity problem? And if he asks for concession, can I go to the, for example, PPP authority, who essentially may only be familiar in terms of looking at currently the more physical infrastructure, but that menu also, the template also needs to be created. Two other things, sir. Data was top. I think we little understand what is data. Data should be not simply in terms of generating data, but data-driven solutions is the key. We understand so very little. Data, everyone says about gold, but we do not know. I give one example, sir. There are very basic 201 or 301 kind of data-driven applications already available, which can immediately, right now, with a dashboard, let you, sir, for example, understand how much of jute crop is right now standing in the. We don't need to go through BADC or Department of Agriculture Extension. You will get it, sir. And then it becomes so easier for you as a secretary or a minister in the government to make the projection and then to check or plug the possible market distortions or asymmetries. That is what is needed. So again, I think all across all the BTP projects, and that's why IPDC can come in terms of hand-holding, should be there. And the final point, when BTP was conceived, and even now when we talk about it, we talk about even SDGs you mentioned, sir. SDGs hinges largely or assumes that private sector would come. Private sector could only come for profit. But if you don't create that framework for them, space for them, the rights, when we all think about it, I've not heard any reference to, for example, the positive disruptors, like the impact investment, like the startups. Even in Bangladesh, the startup, the supply side corrections are considerably coming through their hands. So I'll stop there, and I think these could be just food for thought. These are not at all exhaustive. Some of these I flagged to GCA and the Delta team. I think it's time that at least in Bangladesh, let Bangladesh as a living lab, create that space, bring you in, you try your ground, it helps Bangladesh, but eventually it would help a universal framework like IPDC to flourish and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Riaz Hamidullah, Ambassador. Thank you for your guiding remarks, I would say. In the meantime, in the chat box, we find Dr. Noor Nahar. She also mentioned about the green guideline from the Planning Commission. I understand that key is water. And in our country, infrastructure is much more important, how we make the climate resilient infrastructure. So GCM, along with the IPDC, started working on the nature-based solution and local-led adaptation. I believe with all these and your guidance, the journey of Delta Plan 2100 will get much momentum. At the same time, Bangladesh government very recently this year identified the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan. The climate, all the vulnerable countries, they are trying to adopt the plan of their climate-based prosperity plan. We need to give much more emphasis on implementing the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, because IPCC report 6 says that what we are supposed to happen in 2050, that is coming down to 2030. So, dear colleagues, on behalf of GCA, on behalf of IPDC, I put my sincere thanks, especially the panelists, these 5 panelists, Riyaz Hamidullah, Dr. Nurun Nahar, Ms. Catherine, Ms. Hasil Jahan, and Tanim Ishtiaq. I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I want to reiterate that as well. And thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Azad, for chairing this session today. And thank you also to all of our participants who tuned in across different platforms here on Zoom and on LinkedIn as well. I'm just going to post a few links here in the chat. So here you can access our water adaptation community website. You could sign up for our newsletter, view the event page to keep up with upcoming webinars and events. Or if you prefer LinkedIn, there's also a LinkedIn group where I post updates about any events we're having as well. And on that website, there's also an email address where you can get in touch with me to touch base with the water adaptation community if you're interested in learning more about getting involved. So again, thank you everyone who made this possible, and have a great day all.
Thank you. Thank you, Olivia, for your